Road trips can be freeing. Hours on the open highway, music playing, nothing but miles of pavement ahead. But there's another side to them. You're isolated, surrounded by strangers. Sometimes hundreds of miles from help. And every once in a while, something happens out there that will make you wish you'd stayed home. These are 3 disturbing true road trip horror stories. I've always been more of a night driver. There's something about an empty highway under a clear sky that's calming to me. This happened in 2017 when I was driving from Reno, Nevada to Flagstaff, Arizona for work. I had about 8 hours ahead of me, but I didn't mind. The plan was to leave around 9 p.m., drive through the night, and get into Flagstaff by sunrise. Most of the road was straight highway through open desert. Towns were few and far between. You could drive an hour without seeing another set of headlights. It was around 1 a.m. when I first saw him. A lone figure was walking along the shoulder in the opposite direction. At first, I thought he might have been a trucker whose rig broke down, but as I got closer, I could tell he wasn't dressed like a driver. He had on a faded hoodie, jeans, and sneakers so worn the solace looked uneven. His pace was slow, almost like he wasn't going anywhere in particular. Now, I know most people would say never pick up hitchhikers, but I've given a few rides before and never had an issue. And honestly, there was something about the emptiness of that road that made me feel guilty just leaving him there. It was freezing out and he didn't seem to have any gear. I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, and rolled down the passenger window. "You headed east?" I called out. He nodded without smiling and opened the door. The first thing I noticed when he got in was how pale he was. His hands were trembling and not from the cold. He didn't smell like alcohol and his eyes weren't bloodshot, but there was something off. He didn't tell me his name, just said, "Thanks," and stared straight ahead. We drove in silence for maybe 15 minutes before he finally spoke. "You ever think about how far the desert goes?" he asked, still looking straight ahead. I glanced at him, unsure how to answer. "Yeah, I guess it's pretty empty out here," I said. He nodded slowly, then muttered, "A lot can happen in a place like this." It wasn't a threat exactly, but it put me on edge. I decided to keep the conversation light, asked him where he was headed. He said, "Just down the road." That didn't mean much out there. Down the road could be 30 miles. After another 10 minutes, he leaned forward suddenly and pointed to a small dirt turnoff. "Here's good." I slowed and pulled over. There was nothing there, just a trail disappearing into darkness. "You sure?" I asked. He turned to look at me for the first time since getting in. His expression was blank, but his eyes looked almost excited. "Yeah, my friend's just over that ridge." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He got out, shut the door, and without another word, walked toward the ridge until he vanished into the dark. I sat there for a second, debating if I should offer him a flashlight or something. But then I saw something in my rearview mirror that made my stomach drop. There were 2 other figures, further back along the shoulder, walking toward the road. They hadn't been there when I stopped. Both wore dark clothing, and one of them was holding something long in his hand, maybe a crowbar, maybe a bat. They weren't walking fast, but they also weren't hesitating. That's when it clicked. The guy I picked up wasn't stranded. He was bait. I threw the car into gear and took off, gravel spitting out from under my tires. I didn't look back until I was a good mile away, and when I did, the road was empty again. I drove straight through to Flagstaff without stopping once. For the rest of the trip, I kept replaying it in my head. If I had hesitated just a little longer, or gotten out of the car for any reason, those 2 guys would have reached me. Out there, in that kind of isolation, there's no yelling for help, no cell service, no second chances. I still don't know what they wanted exactly, but I have a pretty good guess. This happened back in 2014 when my younger brother Jason and I drove from Dallas, Texas to Denver, Colorado for a friend's wedding. The plan was to make it a fun little road trip, split the driving, stop for good food, maybe see some sights along the way. It was supposed to be a simple 2-day drive. The first day went smooth. We made it into the Texas Panhandle by late afternoon, stopped for dinner in Amarillo, and kept driving until about 11 p.m. before deciding to call it a night. We weren't tired enough for a motel, so we figured we'd crash for a few hours at a rest stop and head out before sunrise. The rest stop we found was small. Just a couple of parking spaces for cars, some truck stalls, a vending machine area, and a single bathroom building with peeling paint. The whole place was dimly lit by those buzzing yellow sodium lights that make everything look more depressing than it already is. There were only 2 other vehicles there, an old pickup parked near the vending machines and a semi at the far end. We pulled into a spot and killed the engine. Jason reclined his seat and was out cold in minutes. I wasn't that lucky. I've never been good at sleeping in cars, so I just sat there scrolling through my phone, letting some podcasts play quietly in the background. That's when I noticed movement. A man had gotten out of the old pickup. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing a baseball cap and a faded plaid shirt. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just stretching his legs. But instead of heading toward the bathroom or the vending machines, he started walking slowly between the parked cars. Not toward any specific one, just weaving, lingering. The thing that put me on edge was how he kept glancing into each car he passed, like he was checking to see if anyone was inside. He'd pause at a window, lean slightly, then move on. I tried to convince myself maybe he was looking for someone he was supposed to meet, but at 2 in the morning, in the middle of nowhere, eventually he started making his way toward us. I nudged Jason awake and whispered, "Don't move. Just stay quiet." Jason peeked just enough to see the guy getting closer and instantly tensed up. The man walked right up to Jason's window, leaned down, and cupped his hands to block the light as he peered in. He stared for way too long, like he wasn't even trying to hide it. I could see his breath fogging up the glass. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, more like the kind of smile someone makes when they've already decided something about you. He rapped his knuckles against the window, slowly, asterisk, tap, 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 asterisk. "Y'all headed somewhere?" he asked through the glass. His voice was muffled, but deep. I didn't answer. Neither did Jason. We just stared back. After a long pause, he said, "All right. See you around," and walked back toward his truck. I exhaled, thinking it was over until I noticed he didn't get in his truck. He just leaned against it, watching us. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave. I told Jason to get ready, turned the key in the ignition, and started to pull out. As soon as we did, the man got in his pickup and started his engine too. He pulled out right after us. For the first few minutes, I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence. But no matter how many times I changed lanes, slowed down, or sped up, he stayed right behind us. Headlights glued to my rearview mirror. After about 15 minutes of this, we passed an exit with a gas station visible from the highway. I took it, thinking maybe going somewhere public would be enough to shake him. But the moment we got off, he followed. The station was empty except for a single clerk inside. I pulled up right next to the front entrance under the brightest lights I could find and kept the engine running. Jason jumped out and went inside, telling the clerk what was happening. I sat there with my eyes locked on the man's truck as it pulled into the far end of the lot. He didn't get out, just sat there staring at us from the shadows. A couple minutes later, Jason came back out. The clerk had already called the local sheriff's department, and we were told to stay put until a deputy arrived. When the patrol car finally pulled in, the man's truck immediately started up and rolled toward the exit. The deputy lit him up before he could leave. From where we were, I couldn't hear what was being said, but the conversation was short. After a few minutes, the deputy came over to us. He told us the man claimed he wasn't following us and was just heading the same direction. But the deputy admitted that something felt off apparently. The guy had no license on him, gave a name that didn't match his vehicle registration, and had a trunk full of random tools, duct tape, and tarps, no luggage. No food, nothing to suggest he was actually traveling. Since there wasn't a specific crime to arrest him for, the deputy said all he could do was run him for outstanding warrants and tell him to leave the area. Thankfully, the guy didn't have any warrants, but after the deputy had a serious talk with him, he drove off in the opposite direction. We didn't stay at that rest stop or any rest stop for the rest of the trip. From then on, we only stopped in busy, well-lit places. The wedding in Denver was great, but every time Jason and I drive long distance now, we both get quiet whenever we pass a rest area at night. It's like we're both remembering that stare, that slow knock on the glass, and wondering what he would have done if we hadn't woken up. This last story happened in 2019 when I was driving from Nashville to Denver. It was early March, so the weather was unpredictable, sometimes clear, sometimes snow flurries. The drive was about 17 hours, so I planned to push through as far as I could before stopping for a few hours of sleep in the car. By midnight, I'd made it into Kansas. The highway was straight, the sky was pitch black, and the only other vehicles I saw were the occasional semi-truck blowing past in the left lane. I was exhausted, and when I saw a rest stop sign ahead, I decided it was time to pull in. The rest stop was small, just a single building with vending machines, a few bathrooms, and a row of dim streetlights casting yellow pools of light onto the empty parking lot. There were maybe 3 other vehicles there, a pickup truck, a minivan, and a dusty SUV parked far off to the side. I parked under one of the lights, locked my doors, and reclined my seat. I set my phone alarm for 3 a.m., figuring a couple hours would be enough to get me back on the road safely. I had just started to drift off when I heard it. A slow, deliberate tapping on my window. I jolted upright, my heart hammering. Outside, in the glow of the streetlight, was a man I didn't recognize. He looked to be in his late 40s, wearing a heavy jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His smile didn't match his eyes. I didn't roll the window down. Instead, I just shook my head and mouthed, "No." He tapped again, this time a little harder. Then he bent down so his face was level with mine and said something through the glass. I couldn't make out the words, but his tone was casual, like we were old friends. I mouthed again, "No," and reached for my phone. The man straightened up, and for a second I thought he was leaving, but instead, he walked around the back of my car, disappearing from view. I quickly started the engine, but before I could put it in gear, I heard my back door handle click. He was trying to get in. My doors were locked, but the sound of that handle made my blood run cold. I floored it out of the parking space, my headlights swinging wildly as I turned toward the exit. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, watching me drive away. I didn't stop again until I was 50 miles down the road at a truck stop with plenty of people around. I went inside, got coffee, and just sat there, trying to calm down. Later, I thought about the other vehicles in the lot. None of them had moved the whole time. I wondered if the guy had been going from car to car, looking for someone asleep and unlocked. If I'd been a heavier sleeper, or too tired to notice the sound, I don't like thinking about what could have happened. When you're on the road, you get used to passing faces you'll never see again. But sometimes those faces linger just a little too long. Sometimes they wait until you're alone, in the middle of nowhere. If you're planning a long drive anytime soon, stay alert, trust your instincts, and lock your doors. Because you never know who might be waiting at the next stop. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care, and goodbye.